President Biden's on his way to India for the G20 summit, although he's apparently disappointed that Chinese dictator Xi Jinping skipping out on the meeting.
Biden's schedule is packed. The real question here is, can he handle it? The last time he had a loaded schedule at the NATO summit in July, he had to skip dinner with world leaders. His staff blamed his busy schedule. But it sounds to us like Grandpa needed his nap.
And with all that going on, Putin and Kim Jong-un, they're planning their own get-together as Russia tries to get weapons from North Korea for their ongoing war in Ukraine.
Here to break it all down for us, former Department of Defense official and Marathon Initiative principal, Elbridge Colby. Bridge, great to see you. How do you think this trip plays out? Because President Biden is not just old, he's addled. And kind of a rolling embarrassment, if you will, and weakness is, well, a sign of weakness.
Well, great to be with you guys. I mean, I think this is a big event, particularly for the Indians. I mean, the G20 is a big summit. There's a lot going on in Delhi. They put a lot of investment into countries from around the world. It's different from the G7, which is more Europe-focused. But what's very significant is Xi Jinping is not going. He's sending his number two. It's not like Xi Jinping is unwilling to travel. He went to the BRICS summit. And I think what you just alluded to, Sean, you know, Putin and Kim Jong-un apparently have a meeting lined up. What's happening? I think there is a sort of bifurcation or of a division of the world along these block lines. I don't want to exaggerate the point. There's a lot of toing and froing in the middle, countries like Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, to some extent even India, particularly with Russia, that want to play both sides. But I think, you know, what they're signaling is, Xi Jinping's signaling is he's not going to play on Joe Biden's preferred playing field. And I don't think the president has much leverage over him on that. You know,
so, Bridge, what's the purpose of these meetings? Because it sounds like the main thing on the docket is they're going to talk about, you guessed it, climate change, global warming. That's the main conversation these global leaders want to have. What else?
Well, I think that's a big point here. I mean, look, these meetings have their utility. It's important for leaders to get together. I mean, I think the climate agenda here is obviously exaggerated. The economic stuff can make some sense. But one big critique I have of this administration is it's so wrapped up with the optics of these multilateral meetings here, but also particularly with the Europeans, the G7 meeting up in the Alps with NATO. It's almost like the meetings are the point, the trilateral summit with the South Koreans and the Japanese recently. Again, there's good things happening, but at the end of the day, what we really need to deal, particularly with China, but also with Russia and North Korea, Iran, is strength. I mean, I go back to the strategist Clausewitz, who said the best strategy is to be very strong. And what you get from this administration is a lot of photo ops kind of being clever, and that's not as good a strategy as being very strong.
And I was not so eloquently making the point that if they're focused on photo ops with a elderly president who struggles to speak at times, and so it's all kind of a pointless venture. Moving on to this, well, go ahead, Bridge. Where are we going?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think in some ways, honestly, sometimes I think that they think they're the John F. Kennedy administration, and it's not quite John F. Kennedy when you're going over and looking at the optics. And because, frankly, there's such a bubble in the sort of established or corporate media, I'm not sure that feedback is always apparent, but it does get picked up in the rest of the world. People see what's going on, and they can see through, you know, the kind of the optics.
Right. You can't make it through dinner? You leave it at that.
It's a problem.
Exactly. U.S. dollar dominance and access to the global oil supply may be under threat thanks to the resurgence of the economic bloc. You were just referring to it, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The bloc set to add 6 new members, including some of the largest oil producers in the world, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. The group's expansion could signal a shift away from the Western-led global order, again, underpinned by the U.S. dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, emboldening America's most fierce adversaries. I have lots to say about this. Sean and I could do a 5-hour podcast, but Bridge, what do you make of this bloc joining forces?
Well, look, I think two things. One, I mean, the BRICS itself is more of a symptom than it is itself the big thing. And again, it's going, these particularly China, Russia, others like Iran that are joining the BRICS, to some extent other smaller countries like Argentina, that want to contest the U.S.-led order. And that actually it's going beyond, again, the photo ops. I mean, the dollar is part of it, but I think what you're seeing is a reordering of a lot of economic flows. For instance, since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, the Russians selling to the Chinese. You know, a lot of natural resources, the Chinese reorienting, trying to sanction-proof and diminish their reliance on Western-controlled natural resources and markets and so forth. So I think what we're seeing is a shifting of the international economic order, and that's motivated in their part by the fact that they do think that they are in, I mean, I don't want to exaggerate too much, but to some extent a death struggle with the West. And so I think that's something we should really understand what's going on is, of course, the Russians believe they're in a war with the West, but even more formidably, the Chinese, 10 times the size of the Russians, they also appear to think that they're locked in essentially an existential struggle. And it's one thing that's been really interesting is with a lot of the news on China's economic woes, and they're real, you know, kind of seated in the reporting is the sense that Xi Jinping does not want to change course because he believes there's a confrontation coming with the United States.
But Bridge, quickly, what's the economic consequence to the United States if there's a shift away from the West and a shift away from the U.S. dollar?
I think it's very serious. I mean, I know there's a lot of different views and how far this is going in terms of the dollar. But look, the dollar in some sense is rooted on oil, the petrodollar and all these kinds of things. The fact that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, et cetera, are moving, you know, to me, it's like a tectonic shift. I don't think we're seeing it quite yet. But if it does happen, it would be really catastrophic.
Elbridge Colby, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.